Welcome out, you guys. My name is Buck Johnson from the Counterflow podcast. I am a recovering ortho bro. This is my new friend, Protodeacon Patrick Mitchell. We are going to discuss the Orthobros. Do we need to be domesticated? I think to stereotype the Orthobro a little bit, maybe online, maybe male, politically on the right, wear black, have tattoos. I'm looking at you. Maybe J. Dyer appreciators, which I am one as well. Father Patrick, do we need to be domesticated, first of all? But introduce yourself. And if you go over all your accolades, it would take up the entire time.
Can't do that. No. I'll just say, I was going to say I'm a former Orthobro, but actually there are probably people that still think I am one, just because I believe things that we should all believe, things that the fathers taught there. But I'm a retired writer. I've been a soldier, a journalist, a speechwriter, and I now write books. I have 3 books for sale back there in the corner, and I have a new book out here, which I do think you should all read, called Christ is Truth, Truth is Christ. I only have 1 copy because it's just been published this week. But anyway, and I'm a son of the South too, born in Nashville, Tennessee. So,
all right. Well, what the heck is an orthobro? I was called one in a BBC piece, and I don't think they meant it politely. How can we define this?
That's a good question. There is sort of a stereotype there, and it's usually the young man who's just on fire online and to saying a lot of things that make people uncomfortable, and sometimes probably expressing opinions like that in church about different things like that. Obviously, it's only come up recently, and there are two kinds of people I think that typically view others as orthobros, and one is the ortho woke, who realize that these young men coming to the church are actually not woke. And then old Orthodox, and I could almost call them Cradle, although a lot of them are not Cradle, they're converts. They're just older and have been here a while, and they look at a lot of young men coming in, and they dress differently, they act differently, and they have other opinions, and it makes them a little uncomfortable about things. I myself, I don't think that we have a big problem with it. I think largely it's just most of the men I catechize, most of the men I see coming in church don't fit the stereotype. They're actually rather mild-mannered, and if anything, maybe too mild-mannered. They're still learning to take their role in society, and of course, they're not getting a lot of help or encouragement in doing that from society. And that's one of the things that being in church, they can learn from participating in the services and just living among the Orthodox, that we still do value manhood and look to men to be leaders in society, whereas society is telling them not to do that. But yes, there are some who do need to be counseled on a few issues, and that's what we do.
Well, you run a catechism course. When you see these young men coming to the church and they speak with you, you're putting them through the classes and whatnot. What are their, I suppose, are there complaints that they have about society at large? Why did they come here? Are there things that maybe need to be channeled in a more proper way? What are you seeing with that?
You know, the interesting thing is that a big change in the last many years that I've been Orthodox, I received in 1990, is that people are coming to us, male and female, largely having already learned a lot about Orthodoxy. They've watched things online. They've listened to J. Dyer, and they like what they hear there, and they like what they see. And so they already sort of know some things. They have some preconceptions, and what I do is sort of just inform that. But they're coming, I think, obviously, it's because, well, with all that's happened recently after COVID, people began to realize that they need connection. They need a better place to be. The world is very wrong. And they got that message with COVID. And they're looking for a better way to live, better place to be. The difference between good and evil is much more obvious, and now the orthodoxy too is much more obvious. When I came in, there was no internet, and to find anything about found out anything about an Orthodox church, you had to actually go to one and talk to the people there. Whereas now they can find out who we are very early, coming in. They like what they hear, and sometimes that can be the issue, is that the reality may not meet their expectations. But then that was sort of the reality for me too when I came in. There were, a young man comes in, he's coming in because he believes this is right, this is good, but then he sees that, well, not everybody covers their head when they're supposed to, or there are pews, and it takes a while for a young man to sort of realize that, well, you have to deal with people where they are and not expect perfection, because we're all here imperfectly and all here to actually learn to be better people. Most of them grow out of it. And I'd like to say I grew out of that impatience, partly by finding a better place, other parishes to go to. But partly also just by realizing that, some things we have to live, we have to bear the weakness of others, and also realize the weakness in ourselves. So.
My spiritual father is here, Father Turbo Qualls, somewhere out there. And there was a saying, a phrase that he said to me on one of my episodes that sort of went semi-viral, I suppose. And it's that a lot of us come to Orthodoxy because of the exotic nature of it, or it's, as he stated, not my dad's Christianity, or it's anti-woke, anti-Skittle, it's anti all of these things. And then sometimes you discover it's anti-you. And then some people sort of fall away from the church. And I suppose the church, would you say the church is there to sort of, one aspect of it, to shave off some of the rough edges that we may have, or presuppositions, I suppose?
Oh, we all have that. Yeah, we're all sick. We're all in need of healing, and even if it's not a spiritual healing, young men go through a period where, an awkward stage where they're still learning social graces there, and it's a little more apparent now because we are so free. And the way people can dress and look. And actually, that's one thing about Orthodoxy. It's always been a little more tolerant of eccentricity. We have a tradition of people who spend their lives at the top of a column, and those known as fools for Christ, who just live very differently. And of course, so it doesn't matter if you have short hair, long hair, that doesn't bother most people. Nevertheless, there is sort of this sense of, it does sort of make some people wonder when you're too eccentric. I would say is that one thing that I've seen with young men coming in is that a lot of them are still trying to sort of find their place. They're not married, typically, and they'd like to get married, but it's difficult. It's difficult for them to find a job in order to make enough money to actually impress a woman to marry them, and that is sort of essential there. Women don't marry down; they only marry up. They're not really attracted to someone who's shorter than they are, or less educated than they are, or makes less money than they do. And so, for a man to actually start his life, and this is something that comes up in conversations of the catechism, but not part of the formal program. But it's worth saying is that young men really do need to sort of focus on getting their life together if they want to get married. And that means, it does mean sometimes not being so eccentric, trying to sort of take the role or look a little bit more like you really want the job you're going for, or you really want the woman you're going for there. So those are some of the rough edges that people might want to consider. It's not required, but it depends on what you want out of life. And sometimes we do have to be all things to all people, as St. Paul says. We do have to conform somewhat to the world around us and not just be so individualistic, not just be so about ourselves, which is a lot of times what the world will tell you to do. The world will tell you to, just do your thing and who cares what everybody else thinks. But no, we have to be humbler about that and realize that, no, we do need to get along with people, and that sometimes does mean we have to modify our own behavior.
Some of us, many of us, I suppose, at least in my circles, maybe I'm a bit in a bubble. I did an episode a couple of years back called The Libertarian to Orthodox Pipeline. Can you talk about some political presuppositions or maybe labels that we might want to shed once
Right. Yes. Yes. Doug and I talked about this earlier because you were a paleo-libertarian. And
Yes.
I did write one book I wrote that's not back there on the shelf is called 8 Ways to Run the Country. And there's a whole chapter on paleo-libertarians and another kind of libertarian.
That book is here?
No, that one's not here.
Okay.
But it's still available online. 8 Ways to Run the Country. I hope to do a new version later on. But yeah, this is a problem. It's not a big problem, still there. I have run into some who do have rather extreme ideas of politics, and they can be from the standpoint of being libertarian and almost anarchist, believing that, well, gee, unless it's an Orthodox ruler, then or government, then you really don't owe it any obedience, which is not what we teach, of course. And then some who are just avowed monarchists, and they latch onto this idea that monarchy is the way. Both of these, I think, are very unsubtle ways of looking at politics, and it's typically by young men who don't have a lot of experience in politics. And it's also a natural inclination that people want things simple, and so they latch on to easy answers to political issues, which is libertarianism or monarchy and whatnot, whereas the Orthodox approach to politics has always been much more pragmatic, meaning that we're idealists about spiritual matters, but we're pragmatic about how to use force against people, which is really what government's all about. And that's the Byzantine experience, and it's the Orthodox experience. We cooperate with the state in the doing of good, and we resist the state in the doing of evil. And yet all governments are going to do some evil, and we have to sometimes live with that. So those are the things. Those things, and I don't think you're going to offend anybody if you're too libertarian or too monarchist. Although if a reporter from the BBC or Sky News comes in to interview you and you talk about being a monarchist, yeah, you're going to make the Orthodox look kind of strange there. Other issues are more controversial. Race, ethnicity, those are very touchy subjects. And yes, some people do come in with rather extreme views there too that could be even more damaging to the church. And a lot of what we teach is, of course, to give people a better understanding of all these things. And in general, I really sort of, you get that in church. Yeah, you get that through living with other people. And hopefully some of these ideals will fall away. And they usually do. I once heard a priest say that another priest had been asked by one of his parishioners, "Are we getting any of these white nationalists into our church?" And the priest's response was, "Well, I hope so. How else would they be saved?" That's sort of it, is that, yes, there are a lot of people who come in with wrong ideas about a lot of things. We all do. We all come in with wrong ideas about things. And the church is there to lead us into better ideas. And as long as you're not too vocal about your wrong ideas, there's patience and there's forgiveness. And only when you're very vocal does it become a serious issue. And if it's very public, well, public sins require public penance. And fortunately, I don't think we see a lot of this. I certainly don't see much of it. But yeah, sometimes that's a minority, a very small minority of people.
You sort of alluded to this earlier, but I wanted to touch on it again. When we spoke recently, I had asked you, do you see young men or young people or old people coming in where maybe some presuppositions were there from Protestantism or something like that, where it's a religion in your head rather than a religion in your heart? And you brought up how the information so readily available now as it was to oppose when you came in, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, well, that is a common male tendency to focus on the right and the wrong. We're geekish about that. And again, it's just something that it can cause a lot of troubles. And again, I've been there, done that as a young man. Unfortunately, there was no internet, so I didn't make a bigger fool of myself, or at least nobody remembers it, except maybe some of the people here in the audience. I don't see it as a big problem. The important thing is to recognize if you're going to be holding forth online about things, realize, the first rule of communication is know your audience. Well, who's your audience online? It's the world. What do you want to say to the whole world? And that world never forgets because it's always online. And so you have to be very careful who you're talking to. You may not you may think that it's just some other guy, but the person may be twice your age and ordained, much better informed about the issues that you're dealing with. And that's something that, some people don't realize, and they just act rather arrogantly online without realizing that that you're disrespecting somebody and talking nonsense. Yeah.
Well, and when you came to the church, there was not a lot of books to be found and read, so you had to go and learn Orthodoxy in the liturgy, as opposed to...
Yes, and that's where we learn it anyway. We learn it through prayer together, worshiping God together. And I emphasize this, I stress this all the time. It's like my catechism, my books are not the important thing. The important thing is the life of prayer together with other Orthodox Christians. That's how we live. That's really the source of life there. And it's amazing how healing that can be for a lot of differences. When even priests, clergy have differences in the altar, serious COVID, there were serious differences among a lot of us. And yet, as long as we keep actually practicing the liturgy, working, doing our public work of worship together, it has a way of moving us quickly past any differences we've had so that we can actually still remain brothers at peace with each other. But that's the key.
I want to talk about marriage. So a lot of young men coming to the church looking for wives. There's young women looking for husbands. Sometimes it works. Sometimes there's some sort of, we miss each other somehow. Talk about marriage and the view of it from the Orthodox Church and what you could impart to young men coming to the church on this topic.
I've been writing about male-female issues for over 30 years now. And then I've had an occasion after 40 years of marriage, and my wife passing away last October, to reflect considerably on that. And I have to say, I probably came to a better understanding in the last 10 months than I did in those 30 years. Not that I would disown anything I said about male and female before then in my books. That's all very current, except that I've just realized, looking back over my marriage, the way we lived together and the way we should have lived together, her part and my part, and how different those were. Unfortunately, there used to be a tradition as to how men and women, husbands and wives, related. A lot of that has just gone away. You'll see it expressed in some old movies, basically, but you won't see it taught. And in fact, they teach anything but that. And a lot of us went at it with the idea that even I, writing about the differences of men and women, which is why they shouldn't be in the military, 2 books on that, why they shouldn't be clergy. Nevertheless, I've come to realize in the last 10 months, women are more different than I realized. And so men have to behave differently also, and understand that. I do think there's a lot of good online on this. Unfortunately, it's not largely by Orthodox or sources. It's a lot of it's consistent with what we would teach, a traditional understanding of male and female, but not quite what we do. The church historically has always emphasized, in a sense, correcting the ancient mistake of believing that women were inferior, is emphasized the sameness of the sexes. Well, now we've gone the other direction, where we emphasize the sameness so much that we ignore certain realities about the role of the husband in the family. He really is meant to be the head. And that means he's sometimes has to have the last say about things. The responsibility of the husband, of course, to give his life for the wife, but also the responsibility of the wife to respect her husband. And that's not just the respect you give to anybody, that's the respect you give to someone who is your head. When a man is respected, he will do his best to rise to the occasion of leading. It's difficult to do that, though, when he doesn't get the respect that he should. And this is something that I think I've had several, just in the last couple of weeks, 3 men have come to me with questions about this. Difficulties they're having either with people they're seeing or their wives. And I think there's a lot to be done with that in the future. Unfortunately, we fall into some bad habits. I tend to believe now that couples counseling was originated by feminists to talk men into going along with birth control. That's a 20th century thing. You go to your father confessor for guidance, but you go individually in confession. You don't sit a man and a woman down together and have the priest act as the arbiter. When you do that, you basically are denying the relationship between the man and the woman there. That's my personal opinion. It is an issue. It's now becoming something that there's a lot more available on, and maybe some Orthodox fathers can also contribute to that. I doubt if I'll live long enough, but anyway.
Well, that's sort of a mic drop. That I had these other questions in my mind, and then you say couples counseling was invented by feminists to promote birth control. You threw me off my game.
Yeah, surprising, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it was surprising to me. But it's like, first of all, psychological counseling was also a relatively recent invention, and it was for people who didn't have priests to go to. It's what Jews did because they had no priests. So they had to go and talk to somebody about their psychological problems. Well, the fathers deal a lot with psychological problems. So we've always had this focus, the need to heal the mind, the repentance that's required, to change the way we think about things. But the way to do it is individually and not by, assuming this equality. Because that's what women will a lot of times do if they are called to as they are, to look to the man, to submit to the man. Well, they naturally become impatient with that times. And what do? They want to call in another man to put the man over them in place. They'll call the cops in an argument, or they'll call the priest so that the priest will tell her man what to do. It's like, that's just fundamentally undermining of the marital bond there. I'm sure there are priests with much more experience in counseling couples than me who would differ. I'd be interested in hearing the comments on the other side too. It's not something I would write about now because I'd need to do more research and what. But it does point to the fact that men and women are different. They have different roles to take in society. And our world tells us to ignore that, and yet it's not working. Ignoring that is just alienating men and women. That's it. So in order to bring men and women together and to live happily together, we've got to recognize the differences between us, and we've got to assume the roles that God has given to us.
Before we close this out, I don't want to be disrespectful to the women coming to the church. No one's calling them, ortho cis or something like that. But is any pitfalls that young women should look out for coming to the church? When we spoke prior, you said a lot of them are like wanting this sort of tradition.
Orthodoxy offers different things to different people. There's something for everybody there. And women appreciate other aspects of it. And I'm sure, women are much in evidence in our churches. They're right up in front. You've always got an image of a divine man and a divinized woman. And so there's a great place. And of course, they love to sing. They can sing in the choir. There's a lot of other things they can do. The only thing, and I'm in Roll Corps. Most of the people that are coming to me for catechism know what Roll Corps is about. They know it's very traditional and what. And so I don't run into a lot that have any objection to things. But obviously, yes, sometimes when you have to make the point about the headship of the man, it's going to mean that you're saying things that just might make women a little uncomfortable. And that I can see is something that they'd have to deal with. I've not seen anyone sort of fall away as a result of that, but I do choose my words carefully without necessarily sugarcoating things. I don't do that. One of my early books was about the early Christian teaching on male and female. So I've got the quotes, I've got the fathers, and the scriptures are plain enough themselves. And if you present it to them right, they don't have any problem with it. Oh, and one of the things I've been emphasizing recently is the part that the male and female plays in the image of God. I argue that indeed one of the way we bear the image of God is by male and female, with imitating the Father and the Son. Between the Father and the Son, all the giving is done by the Father, and all the thanking is done by the Son. Not once is it said that the Father thanks the Son. Not once is it said the Son gives anything to the Father except thanks. And this defines their relationship. And this is also defines a relationship from the man and the woman. The woman is from the man. The man, in a sense, gives life to the woman. He's to live for her. He's to love his wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. And the woman is to respond as Christ responds to the father. The woman is to respond to the husband. And yet they both also give of themselves to other people and also respond thankfully to other people. These two roles, these two ways of love. Same thing between parents and children. Same things with clergy and laity. The clergy, what distinguishes them is they're dedicated to giving their lives for the flock. The good shepherd giveth his life for the flock of the sheep. And rulers and people is that this is how we become one as they are one, through self-giving and thanksgiving. And when you present that to men or women, it tends to make a lot of sense to them. It's a very easy, it's simple, and it's so obvious that we've sort of missed it. But it's there in the scriptures. It's there in the fathers, there in the teaching, there. Love, there are two fundamental modes of love, and it's self-giving and thanksgiving. And if we look at it that way, then we can take the roles that are assigned to us, knowing that both of them are Christ-like, because Christ models both of these roles for us, being thanksgiving towards the Father and self-giving towards us in the church.
Well said. Bottom line this, as we close out, the influx of young people coming to the church, some of us look different. Some of us come from colorful backgrounds, let's say, but it's a cause to be celebrated. Yes?
Yes, that's the thing. It's like most of the problems will take care of themselves. The real problem, people will probably leave and go elsewhere, and we won't have to worry about them. And yet it's really a glory of God that in the last few weeks we now have just literally people flocking to the church. My catechism classes have gone from 2 or 3 or 4 to 10 to 12, 15 sometimes. It's more and more people coming to us. More and more people are finding out about us. I haven't seen what some other jurisdictions report in terms of people falling away after becoming Orthodox. Nobody that I've catechized who became Orthodox has fallen away. Some people I catechize decide they don't want to be Orthodox. And that's because I tell them the truth and they decide they don't want it, really, or it's just too much for them. But no, it's a great glory of God that we live in such an era when so many people are recognizing the truth and the difference. What we offer the world stands out as such a clearer example than it has in the past.
Protodeacon Patrick Mitchell, thank you for doing this with us. Thank you, Jim Jatras, for hosting this for us. My name is Buck Johnson from the Counterflow Podcast. There's shirts back there, very Orthobro looking shirts that you guys can buy from my show. Protodeacon Patrick, would you like to plug that book or anything really?
Oh, yes. This is, I've never said this about any of my other books. Not every book is everybody's cup of tea, but this one is one I will say that about. The one I wrote for my own children so that when they went away to college, I wrote 20 years ago when they were in high school. My son's here today. And I wrote it for them. I wrote it for them so that when they went away to college, they wouldn't lose their faith, having it destroyed by some godless professor. And it worked. My son can attest to that. They're all still Christian. They're all married to Orthodox Christians. And thank God for that. But I also use it to teach catechism. It explains the gospel in a very compelling way. It's the most compelling argument I could craft as a journalist in Washington, D.C. for believing in Christ. And if you'll get something from it, you'll find it very good. So I recommend it. And it's not expensive, just $16 there. And you can order it on Amazon. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.